good evening to you. My name's Steve. I thought it would be lovely to start up a room on Clubhouse where we can get to know an artist in really good detail, really delve in a nice way, delve into their past, their present, their future, find out what makes them tick, find out what inspires them. So it leads me on now to introduce our artist for today, and that is Salina Gomez, also known as Ink, and her company is Illustrious Inklings. Now, it's a great one to start with, this Salina, because she has the most amazing background. She's got the background of a gypsy, the education of a digital artist with a little touch of Socratic method of cooperative, argumentative dialogue. She's lived the experience of working as a death doula, an art teacher, a prop designer for special events, and a mural and portrait contractor. Wowee, what a great artist to start with. Hello there, Salina.
Oh, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you are doing this series. You are just the right person for it. And I'm so glad the Artist Lounge is letting this happen. It's going to be a great series.
So I'm going to start off really with a bit of scene setting for everybody. If you'd like to just tell us where you are.
Right. So I am in Denver, Colorado, and Illustrious Inklings is a sort of umbrella company, small business that I named probably about 5 or 6 years back. Never really did anything with. It started off as a small blog from my personal portfolio website, documenting my journey through trying to break into comics. And then that didn't end up happening, but I did end up deciding that I wanted to have an artist alias, just because my name's already taken, which isn't too bad for search engine optimization when I'm putting metadata into my website name.
Of course,
but,
yeah.
Yes, but the name's already taken. And so I thought, I'll just create an alias, and Ink just kind of popped out at me because I was attempting, prior to what I'm doing now, to break into comics as an inker. And so just was the other part of the word that happened to pop out at me. And so I stuck with that.
Brilliant. So how long has Illustrious Inklings been going on then? How long have you had the company?
About a year. Informally, about 3 years, as I started the coloring book that I just published last summer. But officially a year. Technically, for tax reasons, a year.
Right. And we are going to delve into that colouring book towards the end of this interview, I promise you, because I've got lots of questions to ask you about that. So let's go back then. Now, people can, of course, log on now to your Instagram feed. You put up some lovely pictures already for us there, some images of your works. If anybody wants to check them out as we're going through the next half an hour, that would be brilliant. So let's take you back a bit, shall we? Let's take you back to when you were growing up, finding your art. How did it all start for you?
Let's say I was a quiet, shy, observant little person, and I felt a little bit outside of myself in my family. And so I just took to drawing naturally, as I was quite reserved. And so drawing and coloring was always something I did as a kid. And then it wasn't until high school that I actually realized I should probably pursue it. I had actually been better at writing little stories than anything throughout grade school and high school. But then, you have these choices of electives in high school. And I thought, okay, I'll just do an art class, it'll be easy. And I ended up, discovering that I really liked technical drawing, and it was meditative for me. And so it wasn't until high school that I really started to take to it.
Did you find there was a particular teacher at school that was instrumental in really sort of fanning your art to get it going, or was it just you on your own?
No, it was definitely Mrs. Malloy. Mrs. Malloy had, she didn't have a conceptual art practice. She had a very technical practice. And so she was instrumental in teaching me inking, classical inking techniques, which I was very fond of. Pointillism was my favorite. And graphite, drawing with a graphite pencil, and then also colored pencils. She taught me a lot about, pressure and angle at which you hold your drawing utensil. And so just the actual technical parts that you have to develop as an artist in your hand. That's really what I learned from her, that it was an actual, physical
Big
skill.
shout out for Mrs. Malloy then.
Yes.
I think we've all got one particular person. It's usually a teacher that really pushed us. For me, I had a teacher called Mr. Marlowe who pushed me to enjoy the English language, which is what I did. So you found that you like to do sort of comic art, to do that sort of thing. Did you add the stories to them to make it into a full-blown story comic, or just the art?
Well, this is the interesting part, is I never actually read comics when I was a kid. I didn't actually start reading them until I met a very well-known comic artist at my first Comic-Con in Denver in 2012. Denver got their first Comic-Con that year. It was a blessing to our city. It was great. And I ended up meeting a comic artist that ended up having lived in Downers Grove, which is where I was from. So it was an instant, well, look at that. And so I kind of snuck my way into his emails and got a few gems of advice, and worked my way for a while on all the advice he gave me, including reading On Directing Film by David Mamet, and just changing it to On Directing Comics, or on Directing Film. I believe it is that. Yeah, it's Mamet's short book on pretty much how to write for film and lay out.
Oh, you've gone a bit quiet.
Can you hear me?
That's it. You went a bit quiet for a second. Don't worry, that's okay.
But so comics wasn't always my jam. It was, and that was after I graduated art school. So the reason I went to comics was because I was feeling very much a sense of pressure to make a living off of my art. Whereas while I was in art school, I was mostly doing half technical drawing, and then the last half of my education, I was just completely absorbed in conceptual art and performance art, using video, my body, stuff like that. So after conceptual art did not pay the bills, it wasn't until then that I tried to force myself into the career of comics, because I figured, well, I like writing and I like drawing, so I'll just force myself into here. Yeah, so that's.
And did that work?
I recommend, if you're ever struggling as an artist and you really want to find what your real calling is, I recommend forcibly pushing your, what some people would call a God-given gift, into the idea of what everybody else thinks you should do, and then break yourself. And then on the other side of that is gold. Because on the other side of it, you realize what you want to do.
You've heard it here first, folks. So looking at your biography, of course I've done, I'm just amazed at the things you've done. So where amongst all of this did these other jobs then pop up? The death doula, the art teacher, the prop designer, the mural contractor, and how did all this come about? Give us a sort of a timeline.
Yes. Let's see, order of operations would have been death doula, and then events and set design, and then murals, and then finally art teacher. Now it's so lovely that you present it in this way, because it does sound so good the way you put it, but in my mind it's a train wreck of
not at all.
But really it is I'm kind of a whirlwind, and I kind of move through the world or at least in the past, I moved through the world in a way that I felt like, okay, I'm called to do this. I'm called to do that. And so that's sort of why my background is so diverse, because at different times in my life, I just felt like there were things about my life that I needed to examine that were not just about my career. So with the death doula, I started actually in my very early 20s. I believe I was 20 or 21. And I was practicing Vipassana meditation at the time, doing a lot of deep inner work, like doing these 10-day long silent meditation retreats and taking, vows and everything, and like really digging into myself. And when I came out of that, I realized I didn't want to go into college, or rather back to college, because I had left one of the colleges I was in. I didn't want to go back until I knew exactly what it was I was meant to do here. And so that was a tall order. And in the meantime, I took work as a CNA in nursing homes. And I quickly found out that I was attracted to helping people that were close to death. So I moved into hospice work and started to work with people in their homes through companies and help them die in their homes. And then after that, I realized I'm sorry, I have to turn my ringer off. Okay. Now you know that I have Kid Cudi as my text message incoming. Okay. So I ended up finding myself doing like contract work. Like I kind of extracted myself out of the network of working for a company and saw a need for like an actual live-in person to be in the home of the person that's dying in the last, say, 2 days to a month, in a way that the hospice organizations could not allow, legally. And so I just wanted to be that person that could support the family in that time.
So can we just, because a lot of people won't know the term death doula, sometimes it's called an end of life doula, but it's
Sure.
almost like it's almost like a midwife in reverse, isn't it, really?
It is. I mean, and I didn't have as much experience as, if you Google death doula online, you will see people that are like, they've done it for like 5, 10, 15 years, and they have so much. And those people also take, lots of nursing courses, and, they get all into it. For me, I was just dipping my toes in it for about a year. And so, for me, it was more like being an emotional support to both the family and the client that was passing. And I, 80% of the work is just being a placeholder there, somebody that can hold a calm sense of space for the family.
It takes such a strong person of a certain nature to do what you did as a death doula. It's amazing. It's amazing because quite a lot of people see death as being something really horrific, and don't even, as someone who's not dying, don't even want to be a part of seeing it happen. But you actually put yourself right there.
Yeah, I
on
was
the front
fascinated.
line,
I was
helping
fascinated. I wanted
somebody
to observe
to die.
everything. I wanted to see it. I would take notes. I would draw. I just wanted to know every single thing about it, because I knew that from a young age that I had some kind of purpose here. And I think, we all have that sense. But for me, I was like, okay, there's something I got to take care of before I go on with the rest of my life. I need to conquer my fear of death. Like I have to. Like I felt like if I'm going to do the bravest things I can imagine, or that I'm called to do, then I need to at least conquer death, or at least the fear of it. And I think maybe 99% of that fear is gone. And I think a lot of that came through that work, and it was terrifying, and it was hard, and it was awkward, and I wanted to run away in the very beginning of it. But by the end of it, I just saw so many beautiful things happen.
Because
I
it's
can't
a role that you
explain.
don't need any sorry, I say you don't need any medical knowledge for it. It's really to sort of, I suppose, to preserve the quality of well-being and the sense of identity, I suppose the self-worth of everybody at that final moment. And of course, then you're left with the family as well. So all of this must have had an effect on you and your art from then on. It cannot have had that effect.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely gave me, like, I felt like I got more time. Like, and I don't know how that works, but feeling not afraid of death made me feel like somehow I bought more time. and I don't know how that works.
Wow, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? Yeah. So, okay, you've done something amazing there, but you couldn't have done that for too long. I'm sure it'd take it out of a lot of people. So then when you'd spent your year or so as a death doula, what happened next? Did you go back into art?
Yes, so the hospice work was prior to my art education. Then I got my art education. I was actually a psychology major and I was a research assistant. I was going to go on to neuroscience, but then I changed my major to fine art because I realized that I actually wanted to do something that felt more meaningful to me. And it felt like, even though it was more risky to go into art, again, I assessed, some of the natural abilities that I kind of had as a disposition since I was a kid. And I thought, okay, well, writing and illustration, well, I guess I'll just go with that. And so I needed to impart more meaning on my potential career. And so that's why I changed my major. It wasn't an easy financial decision, but it was, in the long run, it meant that I was placing my bets on having a more sort of meaningful life rather than like chasing after a career that would offer financial security. So,
and did you find that as I hear from an awful lot of artists, when they tell their friends and family that they're going to be an artist, did you get that sort of, oh well, you'll never make any living being an artist, you get a proper job type of thing? Did you ever receive any of that criticism?
Wow, that's interesting you say that, because, well, I don't know how many people I told right away that I changed my major. If I did, I don't remember a whole lot of pushback, but I do remember, when I was a kid, my father had all kinds of wishes for me, all kinds of dreams for me. One of the things he always insisted was that I keep doing my art. I keep doing my art. I keep doing my art. And it was one of his ideas for me to go into art, which is why it took so long. I think I was 27 by the time I entered into an art program. And I pushed back and pushed back and pushed back so much because of that fear. I think I was actually enrolled in Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. And like 3 days before that year was supposed to start, I just bailed. I backed out. It was like, nope, I don't want the debt. I had paid 2 years. I took 2 years to pay a debt of one semester at a private liberal arts school in Chicago called Shimer College, which was a great book school, which was where I learned the Socratic method, which is like 2 years to pay off of half of a semester, actually. And I told myself, I'm never going back until I get a scholarship, which I did. But,
well done.
But I guess, I'm trying to figure out where I was going with that tangent. I never wanted to, use art as my source of income for a long, long time. I guess a long time. I always equated it with just sort of a natural ability, like, this is just something from the ether. I shouldn't attach any money to it. So, but that changed.
What is relevant already is that you mentioned about talking about art, and you mentioned about the Socratic method, and that's really interesting to me because I love debating things. And the Socratic method, you just give us a glimpse of what that is. It's a very interesting way of holding a critical conversation, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and I don't know that I know how to define it precisely as a historian would, but I can tell you what we did at our college. So at Shimer College at the time, it's now based in Chicago, but at the time it was in Waukegan, which is north of the city. And we had a beautiful campus. It was an entire residential block of these old Victorian houses. And I was fortunate enough to live in a communal house on campus. And we had these series of houses, and in each house there was like a classroom on like the top floor or the middle floor or the bottom floor. And they were octagonal tables. So there was no more than like 8 or 10 of us in each class. And we had so much reading. We had like 50 pages, I think, a week or something like that. It was just ridiculous. But it was the great books. We were starting from the beginning, going all the way up. I think at the time the curriculum went up to like Descartes, but started from like Thales and Heraclitus and went all the way through. And it was a lot. But the way we did it was we sat around the tables and we would have to have read everything that we needed for that particular class. And we had a facilitator. We didn't have a professor, and the facilitator would be there to ensure that everyone in that circle participated equally in the dialogue, and that the dialogue flowed, and that you know, the rebuttals were civil, and it basically just dialogue, just basically bringing, what you read and having a dialogue and making sure every single person's point comes into play, so that when you leave, there's an organic whole truth that the room came to.
Yeah, that is the important thing. This is why I'm so fascinated by this, because quite a lot of people just want to get their point of view across, regardless of anybody else around the table, and their point of view is the only point of view. But if you can sort of draw out all of the underlying presuppositions, the underlying ideas, and discuss them, people might have contradictory opinions, but it's how you discuss them. I think it's very important, especially when you're talking about art and artists. I mean, it's so relevant, isn't it?
Yes, because we all have such different backgrounds. It's just like this big mirror ball, and we're all like this one facet of it, and we all each have a different angle, but we're all part of it. Yeah.
So where are we now in the journey of Ink then? Where are we? We've reached the stage where you've been an art teacher. Yeah, have we got to that yet?
Yeah, the art teacher was just me coming back into town. I had kind of moved out of town for a little bit to explore other options in places that I could create art. So I lived in Asheville, North Carolina for a few years. And when that didn't work out, I came back and, got back in touch with the people that I knew, my peers, my professors, and, some art professionals in the area, and, told them I wanted to plug back in. And I was, given a pretty good opportunity at a really interesting alternative charter school for girls. And so it was like an academic leadership school for them. And I largely left there pretty quickly. I left after a semester because I felt like an imposter. I really did. I felt like, I cannot teach these girls leadership unless I succeed myself. And that's why I left. It was completely based on the fact that I felt like that, and that I did not want, and I told myself I'm going to make it one day, and that's how I'm going to teach them, and that's how I'm going to make it up to them. So that was.
So from the actual point of view of the art you're producing at that time, how had it developed? What stage was it at then? The art that you
that stage, I was still attempting to break into comics. Yeah.
And then prop designer and mural contractor. There's two very, very interesting developments. How did they come about?
Well, the mural you can see on the Instagram page. The mural contracts came about, and those were all personal murals that I did for people. None of them were commercial. They were all people inside of people's homes or on their properties, and so I don't have any of those displayed. But I do have the mural that kind of set me off on that path, which was it was the Alexian City Center mural collegiate mural contest. I think it was 2007. And it was a statewide competition for any student of art in any of the colleges and universities in the state to apply to paint a mural in the Alexian City Center. And there were 3 finalists. I was one of them. And then, of course, there was, first, second, and third place. I won first place. So that kind of helped me out a bit. A funny story about that. I won't say. I have a suspicion I know who did it, but after I gave my award speech and got my awkward giant check, the very next day somebody got into the Alexian City Center and threw an enormous giant potted tree through my mural.
Oh no!
Oh, and this is not the first time I've been bullied about my art.
Oh dear, jealousy is a horrible thing, isn't it? That's what it boils down to, I think.
Real.
Yeah. Well done for that. So now we're getting probably a little bit closer. Where are we now in the timeline after your murals?
Yeah, that was during college. So after college, like I said, I went out to North Carolina for a little while, and that's where I did props in event design company by a woman who lived in the area, in the Asheville area. And so we did events for black tie events, and just did stage props and upkeep and stuff like that. And so, I mean, I would say that's like the closest job I've had to being like a carpenter, I would say.
So then now I want to talk to you about the influence of religion on your arts and your thoughts, because is that a recent thing, or is that something that has always been there in the background?
Oh, it's definitely always been there. Yeah. I've always been so when I was 20 is when I entered my first silent 10-day meditation retreat. And, people my age at 20 years old were in bars. People were having their 21st birthdays, getting wrecked. And I was just nicely packaged away in a meditation center in silence, quite happy, observing my thoughts and my sensations. I don't know. I've always been, it's just part of my personality. I've always been that way. And you could see the themes in my performance art in college. You could see the ritual, the themes. My first performance in a abandoned warehouse, it was a group exhibition, and that one was called Steady Decline, New Religion. I actually ended up installing 6 17-foot long church pews just for the performance, and recreated a Catholic church setting. And it was more of a commentary on the way that at the time I saw Facebook becoming, our new church. And yeah, it's just, interesting kind of ways of using religion as a lens for which to make art. Not necessarily criticizing religion, but using it as a medium itself to say something.
So do you find that it influences your art on a day-to-day basis then?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Religion, but also just myth, mythology, and the stories that we're so well known for. We stand out from the rest of the natural kingdom because of our storytelling.
Exactly. I mean, storytelling has been a thing that mankind has done forever, and I think it's the beauty of it that can influence such a lot of people in the way in art in particular. What really interests me about your story is that you touch on that and the sort of the probably the Greek myths, and as we'll see in a moment, you're also looking far into the future with the space colonization of the moon and Mars, and we'll touch on that in a little while. I don't want to get into that now, but that's just the broad depth of your thinking, really, which is great. If we could all have that wide breadth of thinking. So now I want. Didn't I see from a recent story you did about you got accepted into a university? Am I correct?
Yes. I spoke last year. I think it was October or November. I went off social media for 10 days, I think. And in that time, it was like I hadn't remembered who I was since before I was corralled onto Facebook. And by the way, I didn't willingly join Facebook. I was drinking with my best friend. It's funny. I was drinking with my best friend over at my sister's house in Boulder. It was some party or something. And we had too many drinks. And my best friend and I woke up in the morning and we had Facebook accounts.
You can blame the wine.
My sister was just I remember before I was drunk that she was just going all on about it. Like, you got to get on there. You get to see me. You get to connect with everyone from high school. And my best friend and I looked at each other like, why in the world would we do that?
You want to do that?
But by the morning we woke up hungover with Facebook accounts. So
you've been drinking Zuckerberg Shiraz then, had you? On the evening. So yes. If we mention Zuckerberg, we've got to mention, of course, Elon Musk. Now,
Yeah.
this is something that you've done, and it seems to have created quite a storm, doesn't it? In a nice way, in that you decided to publish a colouring book, which was the illuminated tweets of Elon Musk. Wow. I mean, how did that come about?
Okay, so when I realized I probably wasn't going to end up pursuing a career in comics, one, because I ended a comic talent hunt contest through Top Cow, and I got great feedback, but I knew I was like only halfway as far as I needed to be, as far as ever being able to be in that industry. And halfway is a long way, and that's a great to be halfway where you need to be to get into an industry is great, but I still had so much more. I had to do so many more things in order to get in there. Like I would have had to spend a very long time figuring out body proportion, because that was the biggest criticism, was that my lines were my panels were flat. Everything was good, but like my bodies were flat and my drawings were flat. And I was like, oh, it kind of crushed me for a minute. And I reevaluated some things. And I just kind of, I had just gone through this dark night of my soul, which could be a story for another day. But on the other end of it, I went, okay, like what's every story, like in every superhero story, like you always end up realizing that their biggest flaw or their biggest weakness is like the thing that they need the most that ends up getting them through it. So I'm like, all right, well, everything I draw is flat right now. So why don't I just go with a coloring book? Because you have to have flat lines in a coloring book, because that's just, there's no depth to a coloring book. So I just hilariously thought, I'm just going to do a coloring book then, like almost half angry, but like half like, well, why not? And I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no inspiration whatsoever on what my subject matter would be. I didn't want to do anything like normal, obviously. I wanted it to come from my soul. And at the time, I was just kind of coming out of a really dark place and recovering. And I ended up finding inspiration in everything that Elon Musk was doing, from the the management of carbon emissions through transferring our vehicles. Well, transferring isn't the right word. Well, yeah, transforming
Yeah.
transforming uh, transportation to electric, and then just the whole inspiration to go further and to go into space, and that explore, like the pioneering explorative sentiment. It's like I always want to adventure. I always want to keep going. I always want to keep discovering. I'm a curious person, and I just thought, well, the inevitable end is just to keep exploring into space. And I grew up on science fiction. My father was very much interested in science fiction. We have a whole thing with sci-fi series, documentaries on TV and stuff. It's one thing we bond over. And so I just kind of reclaimed that part of my childhood that I felt like I'd lost. And one of his tweets that I read just made me laugh so hard. I literally think it was like a really old tweet, and he just said Jupiter is big. I was like, I don't know what happened in that moment, but I just started laughing so hard. And I'm like, I don't know. I started looking at some of the things he'd said before, and I'm like, this is funny. This is really funny. And I was like, I have to draw this. I have to, because part of me had thought, well, why don't I get into art, editorial cartooning? There's money in that, maybe. Even if there isn't, it's at least a job.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the idea, is like, well, I'll just do editorial cartoons of the Elon Musk tweet news, and I'll imagine myself as sort of Hunter S. Thompson type gonzo journalist, and immerse myself in the culture of the Twitter fandom. And it was wild and crazy. And there were times where I felt absolutely berserk, because it can be a war zone. It was a war zone for a few times there on his Twitter feed. And so it was just, it was fun. It was a fun idea, So it had to be fun.
52 of these illustrations, these coloring sheets. And the book has been a success, hasn't it? I looked on Amazon earlier on today and it's sold out.
No.
It is. It's not available on Amazon, it says. Not available.
That can't be true.
Well, you're more successful than you thought you were. If not, if
Um,
it's a copy, I want to buy one.
well, that might explain why the sales haven't come in the last couple of days. I'll have to check on that because I have
Yeah, check.
about 170. My inventory should say about 170 something on the website, so it
Right.
wouldn't surprise me if
Maybe they're waiting for another batch to come through from you, Amazon. I don't know. I don't know how you're supplying, but anyway,
Well, I'll
the
get
book.
that. No, there's about 170 copies left, so I'll get in touch with them and fix that. But yeah,
get that fixed. So that brings me on to the whole idea of this space colonization, because that is a big thing for you, isn't it? And you've got your own room on here on a Monday, haven't you? About the call to space, because I joined the room the other day. It was fascinating. So tell us a bit about. You mentioned sci-fi played an important part of the bonding between you and your father when you're growing up, and your interest. How much of the science fiction that we all remember, well, I probably can remember a lot more than you can, right back, how much of that do you think is going to become reality?
well, I guess it depends if you're talking about the classic science fiction or like Neil Stephenson science fiction. It's a
just
quite a
some of
leap.
the things. Some of the things are just the odd things that they used to mention in things like Star Trek and other things like that. Some of those things, that the items, the instruments that I remember being used by them in way back in the sort of 70s, and that are actually come to fruition now. The mobile phones, for instance, it was one thing they used to have their communicators. And what do we have? We had the Motorola StarTAC, which you wouldn't remember, but I've got two of them here, the little flip phones. So things like that, I think there's probably far more things that they discussed in those days, in those science fiction films, that even the writers didn't realize would one day science would prove correct.
Yeah, that's my attraction to that genre, is that you really can, if you have an inkling of what might be possible, even if you don't know technically how it would happen, there's always a way. There's always a metaphor. There's always a way to write it down, and there's always a way to put it out there. I think that, at very minimum, yes, I do. I definitely think we're going to be floating around, orbiting the sun, on other moons, on other floating habitats. Jeff Bezos is talking about floating habitats, and so we have the moon, and we have Elon Musk trying to do his best to get a base on Mars. But asteroids, I definitely think we're going to be mining those. I think once we do, I think things are gonna shift a lot. And I don't know. I don't see interstellar travel as impossible. I really don't. I do think, though, that in the beginning we're going to have to be transhuman. That the humans that, and I think this is not original. I think anybody that thinks about interstellar travel realizes that at least that first sort of like exodus would have to be a sort of transhuman endeavor, where we would definitely have to be hooked up to something like a Neuralink. We'd probably have to, genetically alter ourselves to protect ourselves from radiation, and in some way, reverse aging, or at least stop aging for a while. And I know that there's been, even just a few days ago, I was reading something about, yet another discovery as to what these biological things are in our body that are making us age, and the things that can slow it down. I just think that there's so much, we have so much potential to do those things. I think the only thing that's stopping us is like our fear of the distance. Like yeah, we won't get there. We won't get there if we think in terms of how long things take us right now, but we could develop a technology that will allow us to, I don't know about teleportation, but I definitely think that we can find these pockets. I definitely think there's pockets where we can get from one place to another in a way we don't understand yet, so I don't think it's impossible.
It's fascinating, though. Absolutely fascinating. I think a lot of the problem is that people tend to think too short term for this. I mean, you're not talking about 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time. I know that. But I think a lot of us are a bit, well, not us, because I'm really with you here on every aspect. But I think quite a lot of people limit their thinking to within their lifetime, or maybe probably their children's lifetime, instead of thinking about the future in sort of hundreds of years' time, where we will be. But it is a fascinating topic. And if we'd had this discussion, I don't know, 10 years ago, people would have poo-pooed it. But the longer we go on and the more things that happen on this planet, it becomes almost vital that we do find a way of making it happen. And, conversations need to be had. And that's why your room on a Monday is great, because it allows people to explore it. You can only say so much in another room and before the topic changes. But again, you've used this, your whole fascination with the colonization of planets and space to produce another bit of art, haven't you? This space colonization themed French tarot deck.
Right.
Is that in the making at the moment, is it?
It is. And this is why I decided that Illustrious Inklings had to become, a small business or a startup, because I realized one of the things I realized what I was doing was, what am I doing? I realized I'm sort of sending back items to my younger child self in time to rescue her from the pain she was in. So like the coloring book was just like, what would I have needed back then to just have been okay? Just alluding to like a very difficult childhood. And so that was like a passion project. That was like a healing project for me. And it just ended up being, something that people liked. And so I kind of moved out of that phase. And now I'm like, I think now I'm working with my teenage self. What would she have wanted? Okay. She wanted a really kick butt tarot deck.
Yes. Definitely.
Still on the theme of space colonization. And so Illustrious Inklings is just, trying to create entertainment products for kids and youth to get them really interested in this. Like it's exciting, it just something to hang on to, some kind of mythology to hang on to, so that it can be really dark. I have these very painful, I can't even describe it, dreams of the far future. And like, I don't know how far it is in my mind, but the land is dry. The earth is a desert, and there's like 20% water left, and it's not even drinkable. It's awful. It's painful. I wake up heartbroken and afraid. And that's probably just me projecting. Who knows? But I do believe that, like, I don't know. I just have this hope, like, what if we can, what if I'm so into mythology that, like, I think things like, well, what if, okay, these sacred texts are true, and that bringing heaven to earth means going out there, finding, people talk about the greening of space, like going and taking our life and like spreading it through space and making other planets green. But what if it's the opposite? What if it's like we have something to bring back and keep Earth safe as a sanctuary, well, at least for as long as it astronomically can be, because everything changes and everything dies. But to protect this planet and keep it as a green sanctuary is, like, I think, the ultimate goal. And then, like, to go outside of it and expand and explore, see what else is out there. It just,
and there's no reason we can't do both in the future. Yeah.
Right. So the French tarot deck is actually, I'm sorry, what?
No, I was saying, what fascinates me about this French tarot deck is, of course, you've taken something that hails from the 1500s, from the 15th century, the Italian tarot deck when it originated, and you've put it with a space theme, which is 22nd century, whatever. So it's brilliant combination. I mean, it's brave, a brave artist that does that.
Well, I want it to be a game too, because people like games. So it's a trick-taking strategy card game, and it's played by 3 to 5 players, and it uses the traditional 78 card tarot deck. And it wasn't until later in the 18th century that, the archetypal interpretations of, the trumps, the 22 trumps became like the major arcana, and it became like an occult, almost divination tool. And so I look at this deck as being like a multi-purpose, like it's for playing the traditional game of French tarot with the trumps and the suits. And then 2, for creative storytelling, with the disclaimer that, it's for entertainment purposes only, and any accidental divination or prophesying should be considered the sole responsibility of the players and or their accompanying gods.
Put the disclaimer out there. Quick. No, it's brilliant. And when do you expect this to be available then? How far are you in its construction, in its design?
It depends. It really does depend on, I'm starting my master's. I believe it's the end of this March is when I start the master's, and then I go into the PhD after that. So it's 78 illustrations. So, this culminates in a line art coloring book with the 78 illustrations. It culminates in a full color art book, which has all of those 78 illustrations, but fully colored, as they would be in the deck, with their accompanying short essays and stories. So I'm kind of still sticking with this sort of editorial theme, because the essays and the stories that go with them are going to be kind of like almost editorial content that relates to an element of space colonization based on what that card is. So instead of that traditional deck has a description of your card and what it means, and this is just going to be like more of an essay to consider. And then, of course, the actual deck. So there's 3 end products with it. There's the full color illustration book, the coloring book, and the deck. And so I imagine it could be 2 years. But the fun thing is, if you follow me on Patreon, for as little as $1 a month, you can watch the whole thing happen and unfold, which is what I did with the illuminated tweets of Elon Musk. And so
where's my credit card? Where's my credit card? I'll do it now. I must put my name down for a set of those cards, because they're going to be fascinating.
I thank you. I appreciate that. And one of the things that I love about Patreon is that, like, you get to just show people what you're doing as you're doing it, and then things just kind of happen. Like, people get to witness like the weird coincidences that happen for an artist as they're creating something, and the choices they make along the way. Normally, like, the artist like gets to relish and cherish in that on their own, and they have an end product, and it's like, oh, all this stuff came together in the universe to create this thing that just had to be, and that in your heart, but like, you don't always get to show that to people. And like, for me, showing the process is important. Like, I'm pretty much just going from card 0 to 22 in the trumps, and then each of the suits has 14 cards. So I'm starting with the trumps. I already did the Fool, and I'm almost finished with the Magician. And then we'll go up to the through the trumps, and then we'll go through the suits. The only thing I want to say about that is that my suits are different. I have updated them. They're completely redesigned. They're not traditional.
Okay. In what way they're not traditional? Can you say what you redesigned them to? Or
I just wanted to upgrade them to be a little bit more forward thinking. So thinking about what, in my mind as an artist, space colonization means to me, and what we might need as we are a spacefaring species. So in the traditional deck, you have your 4 suits are earth, air, water, fire. And so in this deck, I'm like, no, that's all the same thing. So earth, air, water, fire is all squished into one suit, which is called matter. This is all the same. Yeah. And then the next suit is forces. So then forces being gravity and electromagnetic, weak, strong, all those forces. And then the next suit is information, which takes the place of currency, or coins in the other deck. Information, I believe, is going to be the currency of space travel.
The key, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what is anything? What's the value? I mean, if we unlock the key to interstellar travel, then it's, materials aren't really going to be currency because we can get to any material we want. It's really going to be the information of where is the material and how much is there. So like, desires is the last suit, and desires is the human element of the deck.
You've got a lot of work ahead of you, haven't you, in the next couple of years to get this to fruition? But it's fantastic. The time is getting, I can't believe we've almost done 50 minutes.
Yes, we can definitely shut me up. I'm so sorry.
Not at all. No, this is the fascinating thing. I know we said an hour, but I could talk to you for ages, for another hour about it all, because it is fascinating. And this is the idea of this room. It gives somebody a chance. And of course, as we found out talking to you, it's not always talking about art. It's everything that you've done in your life has influenced where you are now, has influenced the artist you are now. And when you're going on to produce stuff in the future, everything that you've done, that's why these discussions are great. That's why these interviews are going to be so incisive, because maybe an artist, while talking to me on here, will suddenly realize something maybe they didn't remember, because I've sort of delved a little bit into it. So hopefully it hasn't been too much of a trauma for you being my first guest in here.